Now, I'm a 90s kid, so I know that this movie was a little bit before my time. I mean, it was coming out before I was even born, but RoboCop is a franchise, at least the first two films, that I really connected with. I loved the exploration of humanity, man versus machine, man forced to be a machine, and what is left of the man. There's a lot of deep elements in there. So when RoboCop Rogue City was announced, came out, and was actually really good, it ended up being one of my Game of the Years, and I talked about it. I loved the game, but I noticed not a lot of people saw those videos. So I made a video a week or two ago about the new standalone expansion for RoboCop Rogue City, Unfinished Business, and I was actually shocked to see that a lot of people seem to be interested in RoboCop right now. It might have been a fluke, maybe no one will see this one. It reminded me of a topic I had wanted to cover months ago, which is the idea of movie-based video games. Now, this is a video that I think I will also do one in general on, but specifically I wanted to talk about how RoboCop itself, as a game, RoboCop Rogue City, shows that these kinds of games can still work. It shows that video games based off of movies can still work if you give the people making them creative freedom and you don't ham-fist in a bunch of plot elements while tying their hands. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about this today because these are a type of games we don't see many of anymore. I mean, we used to see them all the time from when gaming was first starting and there were licensed movies all the way through, I would say, the 2010s, but we don't really see these games anymore, and I actually think that they could work following the template that Rogue City laid out. So if you enjoy this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate that very much. I do have a question of the day for you, which is, what is your favorite video game that is based on a movie? It could be a movie adaptation, it could be, just taking the movie universe and adding to it like Rogue City did. Let me know, because I actually have quite a few I enjoyed growing up. I think one of the questions you have to ask yourself right away is, why did RoboCop Rogue City succeed? Now, was it because it was a fun game? Yeah, absolutely, it was a fun game. But guess what? Plenty of fun games come out, and they actually go unappreciated. I was recently recording a video with my friend Podcast Now, Alex, which hasn't gone up yet, about the Guardians of the Galaxy game. That's an example of a game. It was good, but it went underappreciated and it undersold. Because I always hear this thing. I always hear, well, if you make something good, it'll sell. Then people can apply it to YouTube videos. I hear people say it to me when something doesn't do good. I hear people say it to video game developers, like, well, your thing just it wasn't good. That's why people didn't buy it. But I can name a dozen examples of good things that people didn't buy. Maybe they weren't aware of it. Maybe it wasn't marketed. You know, there's a new Looney Tunes movie in theaters right now that I would say is not doing gangbusters, but it's a movie that deserves appreciation and support if you care about 2D animation. Just an example right now at the time of recording this with The Day the Earth Blew Up. Things like the Blade Runner movies, things like that Guardians game, things like Midnight Suns. There are games out there and movies and all kinds of stuff that just go unappreciated, even if they're good. But RoboCop Rogue City was not only a fun game, it was not only a game that was with a good gameplay loop, with a deep and interesting story that used an iconic character, but it was also a game that built on pre-existing material around that character. And we can see other games that do this same kind of thing, like Hogwarts Legacy is an example of this. Extremely popular because guess what? It took that universe that people knew and it just set something in a different time period that hadn't really been explored. That's what RoboCop Rogue City does. It takes place after the second movie, so there's very little homework. I mean, you could sit down and play the game without anything and enjoy it, but people who watched the first and second film are going to get a lot out of it, and not just as a simple adaptation. Games that are based on movies, they get lost in trying to be the movie. And here's what I mean by that. When you have a movie, you have a set amount of time in that medium, anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 to 3 hours at probably some of the longest. That said, that works for that style of story. It works for the style of story you're trying to tell, the 3-act structure, beginning, middle, end, and you play out the characters there. And even then, there are times where ideas get scrapped, rejected, tossed aside that maybe would have made the movie better. Made videos about that on this channel on the Rejected Media playlist. So it's already something where you are having to pick and choose what to include. But then when you get a video game that is based on a movie, you're not going to release a 3-hour game. People would be pissed because that game is going to still take a long time to develop. You know, you're having to work with maybe an existing engine or almost building your own from scratch, depending on what it is. You're having to come up with a story. And then at that point, you're not really even getting to make your own story. You're just basically trying to make gameplay fit into a movie, which doesn't always work. I mean, like, even think about the Raimi Spider-Man games. I love them, but I think some of their strengths are when they went their own direction. When they were adding stuff in, I thought it was done very well. But how many games add stuff in and it's absolutely terrible? How many games just do they decide to add to the movie and they still have to keep that same basic structure? So the problem then becomes you're trying to tell an original story, but you're trying to tell it around an existing story. You're trying to tell it at the same time. It's not something like RoboCop Rogue City. What this game does is, instead of saying this takes place during RoboCop 2, Kane is the villain because he was in 2, you're gonna have to have him as the main villain, but you're gonna have to fill in all these gaps to make it last 15 hours. Instead of doing that, it says, no, those events happened, you watched the movie or you didn't. We're at a different point in time, and we're now dealing with, you know, the voice actors like Peter Weller, who played the original RoboCop, and other classic actors who ended up in this game. So it's like you are immersed in that world of the movie, but we already told that story, or somebody else already told that story, and this is our story. Another game that did this very well, I thought, was actually the first Amazing Spider-Man video game. Now the second one went off the rails. It's really a mess. But the original one, I remember at the time it was called an Arkham clone and it was panned, but it actually took the storylines of the first movie and it kind of expanded on them in like an Amazing Spider-Man 1.5. But where that failed, I think because of an okay story with not enough budget and a frustration with the brand at the time, where people didn't want a recasting with Andrew Garfield, they didn't want a new Spider-Man. I think where that failed, RoboCop Rogue City was able to succeed because it didn't do those things. It didn't need to deal with recasting. It didn't need to deal with trying to work within the limitations of an upcoming sequel, because RoboCop Rogue City already knew what was next, and it already knew what came before. The developers were able to write a story and create a world that fits neatly in as a slice of the story of the RoboCop universe. And it also does a really good job of respecting both sides of the argument when it comes to the classic RoboCop trilogy. Now, I don't know if you've seen RoboCop 3. It is my least favorite RoboCop movie, and it's actually a movie I don't really recommend to people. I don't really even enjoy it for the most part. Peter Weller was recast because of reasons that it's not even important to get into for the video, but regardless, it wasn't the same actor, it wasn't the same story quality, a lot of things were on the decline. Now, in a way, that might make you think, okay, well, RoboCop 3 still has to happen, so that means that Rogue City can't be good, right? I mean, its hands are tied. Well, not necessarily. Rogue City was able to be a story that connected to the first two games, and it actually did set up the events where 3 could still occur. And so in that way, for the people who didn't like RoboCop 3 at all, this was almost like a third movie that you played through, like an extended stay in that universe that respected the source material of the original 2. But that said, there are a lot of people who do like the third movie, even without Peter Weller, even with the story. They enjoy that for what it is. I've heard a lot of people say they prefer it to 2. Great, good for them. I don't, but that's fine. But that movie, it doesn't just basically take a piss on them. It doesn't basically just say, well, screw you guys. What it does is that game is able to respect those original 2 movies while setting up the world into a position in almost a 2.5, like a RoboCop 2.5, that could lead into 3, or you could just stop right there. Someone like me who doesn't enjoy 3, you could play this game and you basically have your RoboCop trilogy now that you do enjoy. And I think that in that way, this is something that respects source material, adds on to the story. It's not beholden to cram a 3-act structure of an existing movie into its narrative while building on it. and it proves how you can still make a video game that's based on a movie. It's just that instead of trying to retell the movie, maybe what you do is you take that world and tell a new story that respects everybody who worked on those worlds before and enjoyed those worlds as a participant of them. I love that about RoboCop Rogue City, and I really think that a lot more things could learn from it. I think, unfortunately, the new direction for a lot of movie-based games is just copying things like Friday the 13th, just doing like a team-based survival game or things like that. And there's room for that, but I also think this proves that there is room for these extended stories. These stories can exist in this universe, and we can take the best elements of them and make a new story out of it. Now, people can engage with that story and they can enjoy it, and it builds that universe and adds to it, but if they choose not to, it's not so integral that they don't enjoy the universe itself as maybe just a film lover who isn't into video games. And that's the same exact thing I think something like RoboCop Rogue City does, is it reinforces this idea of being creative while being able to exist in that universe. You don't have to have your hands completely tied. If you have a group of creative developers, a creative studio, and creative writers, you can still add on to a classic and make it even better. If you enjoyed this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate that very, very much. We have a Fortnite code that goes to help support our channel if you are a big gamer. We also do have an Amazon store, which I usually mention. Purchases on that go to help our channel. But my favorite thing we have is our other store, our main store, which is cosmobunny.shop. It's actually my wife's store where she makes coasters, keychains, trays, and more out of recycled paper from comics, manga, magazines, and more that have been damaged. So books that are unable to be sold, that are probably going to end up in landfills, we take those, we make transformative art out of them in a new medium, and we recycle the rest. So we enjoy that very much. Hope to see you over there. Hope to see you maybe on some other channels or videos. Those are all in the description down below. I have a RPG channel, we have an anime focus channel, a podcast style video game channel where we do Let's Plays, lots of stuff. We do lots of stuff. So love to see you on one of those. Have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.